Hi, thanks for joining us. My name's Jesse. I'm the Managing Director here at Horizon Digital. Thanks for joining one of our tech series interviews where we talk to interesting people doing interesting thing in technology. So today I've got Richard McAllister, MD of Scalabl. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
No problem. So we're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so just going through a bit of your journey running Scalabl or starting Scalabl, which is probably, I would say, Perth's best and leading consulting in agility, ways of working, and in some ways probably started a lot of the movement in Perth, I would say. So we're going to go through that, get your sort of insights on what's happening in the industry, what's happening in terms of agility, and just some of your stories and what you've learnt along the way. So how's that sound?
Sounds great.
So, to start off with, we've known each other for a little while, but you've actually known my business partner, the other director at Horizon Digital, Jason, for a lot longer. You and Scalable's actually had a pretty big impact on Horizon Digital because, I've worked in software agencies for a long time and we've been in that sort of space where, it's kind of like waterfall projects with agile ceremonies didn't really work from a software delivery perspective, but we try and work pretty much all agile in Horizon Digital, and Jason actually learnt that from you guys when he was at Lotterywest, and they went through a big, I think it was about 18 months or so at Lotterywest, where they went through a big transformation. You sort of implemented agile into some of the teams there, and it was talking to Jason's experience was pretty interesting because they, some of the teams there went to the agile way, some of them stayed the way they were operating. So I gave you like a really good case study and sort of test because you had same organisation, different ways of working, and the teams that sort of went with the agile way, they enjoyed it a lot more. The team were a lot happier. They were delivering a lot more and delivering higher quality. So it was pretty, the evidence was pretty stark. I don't know, what was your sort of experience from going through Lotterywest? What did you think about it?
Great question. I probably couldn't comment to the teams that we weren't engaging with.
Yep.
So the other teams that Jason saw there, I had less exposure to, but we helped them see things that were getting in their way, and creating autonomous teams. I think Jason, from memory, was in a app team, product team, and their app rating wasn't great, and they were heavily reliant on other areas and departments and teams to help them deliver value to customer. And it was a mindset shift and an accountability shift to allow the people who develop the app to deploy the app, to own the results of the app. And they grabbed hold of it. And, if you look at any sort of work, if you've just got a bit part in the puzzle, it's hard to feel connected to the value, or harder to be connected to the value than if you're actually connected into the reason why that work adds value.
Yep.
And so you see a natural and coupled movement here where people they've got to have competency to have the accountability in my eyes, but they have the competency and the accountability, and suddenly you're unlocking human potential because they are consumed with making it better, making it faster, improving the quality, improving the customer retention, usage, experience. So teams and people become consumed with the actual metric that you really want to see shifting the dial in an organisation, and that's, it's a beautiful thing. And how do you scale that, and how do you keep hold of that? And often those teams do it good for a little while, and then the organisation has different constraints, and suddenly, they can regress if you don't stay consistent with it.
Yeah.
Like any habit.
We see it from I've experienced from a software perspective where, as a service provider, clients want fixed price or fixed scope because they feel like it's less risk. they want to know like what the outcome is going to be. So they try and control it. And then when you get into like delivery, then the team, all they focus in on is delivering those requirements. Might not necessarily be the best thing. It might not be the best feature or the best thing for that product, but then that's all their focus is. And when we've changed it to higher level, like this is what they want to achieve, here's the goals, this is the product outcome, then the whole team buys into, well, here's an option, here's a different way of doing it, here's where you might be able to do it quicker or easier, and you actually get them focused on what's the important stuff rather than delivering through like a long list of requirements. So that's sort of our experience. I've sort of been through it firsthand, and we've seen sort of where it works and what it doesn't work.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And it's one of those things where it's harder to create the right environment and the right ingredients for success. Much easier just to sort of push it through with requirements aren't easy to gather, but it's a harder thing to set the right environment for humans to thrive than it is to just sort of put it through the system. But we keep walking through and running into the same issues every day in that model.
Yep.
And it takes a different way to look at the problem and a different commitment to solving the problem. And some of the issue there is it's an ongoing maintenance, like health, like any sort of fitness goals you've got, like any sort of eating goals you've got, diet, etc. It's, the word transform is a bit misleading sometimes, which is organisations who want to shift out of where they are, probably transform is a good word, but actually for me it's an evolution, and it's an evolving way of working and being that requires micro disciplines every day, so that you don't end up with a bad news in a month and in 6 months' time. And to go on that journey, it takes bravery to step outside the current system and the current structures and the current project funding and the current governance requirements, to approach it in a different way, while adhering to funding policy, while adhering to governance, but just looking at it a different way requires bravery. Change is hard.
Yeah, definitely takes some strong leadership, because he's doing something a bit different, and you've got to be committed to that path for a long time.
The data backs that up as well, and there's a study, the Learning Consortium did a study where they looked at hundreds of businesses that were doing transformations, and a high percentage of them failed to hit their intended target. There's a different thread to pull in a minute, but what is the intended target of the transformation is often not clear. It's one of the things I might talk about in a little while, but a high percentage of them didn't hit their intended target, but the ones that did, the single biggest differentiating factor was how leaders led, how they were visible, how they embraced the change, and how they backed it. So they were always around to show that they believed in this new direction, and that they were part of it.
The leadership team probably aligned and on the same page with where they're going.
Absolutely.
Yep. Hey, so we sort of jumped into a bit of the details, but I'm keen to go back to like, how did you get into Agile? Because you've been doing this for a long time. You were in banking and companies like that prior to starting your own business, like you were in it pretty early. So tell us that story. How did you get into Agile, and why do you love it?
Good question. So back in the UK, I was so I left uni and I got a job straight away in tech, and I went to uni to learn about tech just because I didn't know very much about it. And I know I don't look this old, but not many people had a computer at home when I was in school, and then in higher school it was a bit more people had them, but then it was just right at that precipice of becoming mainstream. So I went to uni to learn about it. I left uni on the Friday. I got a job on the Monday in a financial services industry.
So you had a nice break.
Nice break. Starting. typical Rich. And I worked in that industry, which was fundamentally a third-party administrator for the big financial institutions. So doing a lot of data collation, migration, messing around with data sets to try and help our clients at the time produce things that were quite forward thinking at the time. So, for example, Virgin was one of the clients, and they, in the UK, you'd have an ISA with Virgin, you'd have a pension, you'd have a holiday, and that we were doing some really cool stuff where you'd get all their different data sets and you'd produce a single piece of communication to their customer. Mm-hmm. So you'd get, oh, hi Jesse, here's how your ISA's performing, here's how your super's performing, oh, and you're going on holiday to Spain in 3 months, here's areas that we think you'd like based on your age and whatever else, and here's some deals. So it was probably a bit of an early big data sort of movement going on there. And then, I don't know if it's headhunting, but I got an opportunity to work at a company that were a software business in that same industry.
You can say headhunting. Sounds better.
It does sound better.
Yeah.
And somewhere in that mode, I was part developer, part analyst, part project manager. And I just really found my groove with building relationships, managing work, rather than being a developer. So if anyone knows me, I had grey hair when I got a job as a developer because there was only 2 of us who did special projects for the exec team, and the other one was an excellent developer and I wasn't. So he was never in. This is when people didn't work from home. He was always working from home. He had set up his own VDI thing in the late 90s. No one's working from home. He's working from home. I'm in the office on my own, and I'm having to talk to the exec team about where the code's at and everything else. So it wasn't my forte. And I quickly realised that I like to understand the work, and I like to know where work's at, and I like to manage it, and I like to keep people updated. And so I just naturally fell into project management type stuff. And then at this other company I went to, I was doing a lot of that. So to answer your question, the long way round, I picked up a project for a massive financial client, and it was completely broken. Like everything about it was broken. They had 10 of the exec team on a call every day telling the software company where developers should be spending their time. And I got to listen to this for a week, and my task was to win them over because it was an expensive client that we were going to lose. And at the same time, my wife, wonderful Sarah McAllister, was at another financial institution, and they were looking at agile and they were looking at different ways of working. So she basically...
Back in the late 90s?
Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s. She basically gave me a one-on-one coaching about what it's all about. I read the Scrum... What's
Manifesto?
that? Scrum from the Trenches, which was a really wonderful PDF you can still get. I can't remember who wrote that, and I should. Apologies. And I just started lifting all these great ideas and implementing in this project that was absolutely, like, it couldn't get any worse.
They thought, why not?
And it was a massive success. And then they got me to help roll that out across the rest of the company. And then life decision, Sarah and I decided to move to Australia. We were stopping off in Perth on our way round to Melbourne and Sydney and then Brisbane. And we never left. And 2 weeks out of moving, people in the UK would say to me and Sarah, we'd say, oh, we're moving to Australia. It's like, oh, you got a job there? We said, no. They said, oh, you've been there before? We said, no. They went, you know someone there? I said, no.
I've seen neighbours.
They were like, you are mental. What are you doing? I thought, what are we doing? So we applied for a job 2 weeks out of leaving, and luckily both of us landed a job at Bankwest, which was just starting its agile journey. An amazing organisation that really helped us establish ourselves in Perth. Brilliant people working there, like friendships from there for life. And as all good, bigger companies tend to do, they took training and development seriously, and they invested heavily in agile ways of working. And we were right at the start of that. And so, picked up one of the very first projects, and we smashed it out of the park. And I was very lucky that I got to work with some amazing people on that journey. Lee Swanson was in that team, and we just delivered. We were just brilliant at delivery. I've always been good at delivery, and we just delivered. And we delivered the project 2 weeks early. We gave them some, pretend money back, because it's all that project was actual internal spend, so it was just less effort that we spent, but it was a massive success. And the rest is history from there. As in, people in that team went on to do great things. Bankwest went on to do great things in that space.
So you were in a difficult project. You had a short crash course in agile and just went and lived it and just saw some results from it.
Yeah, and I had the luxury of Sarah, my wife, is somebody who
she'd already done
very
something.
good at understanding and learning, and would explain things to me, and very practical and logical. So I had that amazing sort of step up to help me navigate some of the things I didn't know. But I knew about software, and I knew about people, and I knew about work in terms of the types of work we did. And so I was applying a framework. And I think the interesting thing here is I've looking back, I've always been somebody who wants to try to solve the problem without any preconceived solution. And I think that's probably what's helped me in that I was a project manager, but I didn't necessarily have any of the baggage or...
Yeah, you haven't done like Prince 2 or something like that.
I've studied it, and it all
that.
makes sense, and it's great, but it's a solution for a certain problem. And I think this is sometimes where things get overlooked, like what is the problem we're solving? So why agile? Why? Don't just go agile. Like, there has to be a reason for the move towards. There has to be a problem for there to be an adequate solution. And in my eyes, at a very high level, if the problem is global nature of business, highly competitive markets, speed of change, rate of change is unprecedented. Moore's law in the compute power, or the speed of processors doubling. Like, we are living through this world where we're all busy, we're exhausted. There's so many ping pongs going off on our phone all the time. WhatsApp, chap, like whatever it is, it's buzzing. There's other things here around. I think we're losing focus and discipline in that space. But if that's all going on, a traditional way of delivering a piece of work isn't going to do so well in that highly digital, highly responsive environment. And when we see companies doing this not so well, it's when they're really reactive, thinking that they're really agile. And the true business agility is being responsive. So you've done all the great work to know where you think things are going, and no one ever knows. But when your hypothesis comes to fruition, you can very quickly pivot the company, the people, the hardware, the logistics, the resources, whatever they are, you can pivot them to the right answer as quickly as possible. I think there's more in that vein than let's go to agile because it's the flavor of the month or everyone else is doing it, so we should do it.
Yeah,
they're not great reasons to try and implement this. And actually, this is just a way to help you get to your strategy, your goals, your outcomes that you want. Working in a more agile way will help you get there more than not.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest things that we see when we work with internal dev teams, and it's when they're implementing agile, but they don't actually understand why, and what's the mindset behind it. What are you actually trying to achieve? It's not just implementing some ceremonies and having some set meetings. Like, that's actually useless. It's actually, it can be worse than how you're running before if you don't actually understand why you're doing it. What's the purpose behind it?
Absolutely. There's lots of issues in it, and it does also get a bad name for when things go wrong, right? But it's such a simple word that means so much different things to different people as connotations. But for me, fundamentally, it's high performance is a better way that I describe it. Like, I want to work in an environment where there's trust, honesty, feedback mechanisms. We can deliver fast. We can deliver the right thing. You mentioned this earlier. The biggest waste I see is people spending time on the wrong thing everywhere. Yep. How do you work more on the right thing? Dependency management's a big problem. People tend not to design their systems around those things, and it's probably a good idea to look at that when you're thinking about what value you deliver.
I think one thing you missed is you want to work in a team that's fun.
Absolutely.
So we do a bit of this, and that's always something that we talk about, like what do you want this team to do, or what's your values. I always miss the fun bit, but that's essentially that's what people want. Like, they're in these roles because they're passionate about it, they enjoy it, so there's got to be a fun element.
Absolutely.
And you enjoy it more when you're seeing outcomes and you're involved in the process, you understand why. So I think that's one thing that does get missed, but I think that's pretty important as well.
Massively important.
So you're in Bankwest, what, it must have been 10 years or so? 7 years. So you moved to Perth, didn't know anyone in Bankwest for 7 years, and then you and your wife decided to start Scalabl. So tell us, what was that like? What made you make that decision? You know, was it one big moment? Was it a gradual thing? How did you get to that point?
The joke here is I waited till I had 2 young kids and a big mortgage to start my own business.
So when it was easy.
My mum and dad run a business, and I had looking back, they encouraged me all the time to do things like this. So I had a paper round when I was 9, even though I was meant to be 13. Like, they got me out working young. I had my own car washing round in the UK. When I left uni, as I mentioned, I'd sort of stepped into this world where very quickly I was working closely with executives or GM level people, and I just had loads of good things, like that, great projects to do and innovative things. And even working in that 2-team dev thing, I'm working directly with the exec team, and it was always cool projects. So I'd sort of, I don't know if it was complacency or what, but I'd sort of had the luxury of always working on good things. And so the entrepreneurial, do your own thing sort of took a back seat. And then what happened, the real pivotal moment for me was we just delivered a really wonderful cultural shift in a program in Bankwest, and I had a great job. Very lucky. I loved the job that I had, but I had this moment where I thought I've done this over and over again for a company, but I've created a culture I want to be in. And what will happen very soon is they'll ask me to go on to the next thing and do that again somewhere else. And I just wanted to enjoy what I'd been part of building. And that was really the moment where I went, you know what, I want to work around great people who I can be myself around, and I want to do great things. And so that was actually the driver of the business, more than anything else, was I want to work in a team that I want to be in.
So you can maintain the control around that and being, you know, in charge of your own destiny around that.
Yeah. And I didn't know what it was really going to take. And I think you can't ever prep anyone for it, like being a parent, you know. Getting up at 2 a.m. because they've been sick in the bed, and you're up and you're exhausted and you've got a big presentation the next day and you're up clearing up sick in the bed. It's the same in the business. You've got stuff all the time that if someone had told me this is what it would be like, I don't know if I would have signed up for it.
Well,
right?
You're stuck in it now.
But you're in it, and you've got to find a way through it. And I've had to become someone better than who I was when I started, and it's an ongoing journey. I think the biggest and hardest thing in the same breath for me is who I've got to become someone else not in a, flip a switch, but in a tune the dial. I've got to become more patient. I've got to become more understanding. I've got to know my own boundaries. I've got to lead as I expect others to. Like it's there's no hiding place, right? So running the business has been a real wonderful and probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
How is it different to what you expected, and what's been like your biggest lesson or your biggest challenge from? I mean, how long has Scalabl been? 5 or 6 years?
6 years now, yeah. Or just about. How it's been different. You see this everywhere, and it's easy, right? Like the optimistic, what it could mean for me and my family is the dizziness, the bright-eyed going in. The reality is, when you're working on Saturday night, you've been working all week in the evening, and you just keep going. No one sees that stuff, and not that they need to see it, but you don't know that's what it takes. So the biggest lesson is there's more effort than you think at the start, and it all becomes all consuming. So running a business with your wife is hard, because where do you get your joy and outlet outside of that? If it's, running the business becomes all consuming, I would assume in your brain, it's on your mind all the time. So that's been an interesting learning. I've got a great partner in life in Sarah, and
you try and keep it separate when you're at home, right? You try not to talk about work as much.
We're getting better at it. But the joke in the team is that Sarah and I don't talk because we don't have time or space to sit down and talk about every little thing in the business. And also at times we don't want to, because we've got 2 young kids, we've got a family, and we need to nurture and nourish outside of the stresses and strains about running a business. But I'll give you two or three key learnings, right? But these are so obvious that I feel silly even saying it. One is the game doesn't care about you. The game of business does not care. It's brutal. And if you haven't done the work, it will show up and it will hit you in the face. There's no hiding. There's no, you can't fake it. You can't blag it. You might get away with it once or twice, but you won't get away with it. So it's relentlessly honest and true and brutal. No matter what happens, it is what it is. And the other one, which was a bit of a naivety, is that every opportunity comes at a cost. So, a great opportunity to do this work. Oh, we can probably do that. Oh, we've got the capability. We've got the this, we've got the that. There's some cost to doing it. You've got to either recruit, you've got to build out their repeatable product offering. You've got to navigate a really tough environment or culture. There's always a cost to it. And I never used to see that. And now I'm more attuned to weighing up whether or not it's actually a good thing to get involved in.
Yeah, I think that thing about, I think we're both pretty optimistic, so we'll probably more often than not go for opportunities. But there's one thing that I've learned is like sometimes you just got to say, no, it doesn't fit. It's not right for us, not the right time or whatever. So that saying no is difficult. I think trying to learn that over time, because you don't want to get into something that is not the right fit for you, and it's the worst position to be in.
And you've probably done this through learning, as I have, in terms of the pain to finish it makes you think we shouldn't do this again.
Yeah. Although sometimes you don't actually reflect enough to learn from it. You just keep on going. That's probably more my issue than.
Well, it's a good thing to touch on, which is there's all these stresses and strains in running the business, and then where is the space for clarity?
Yep.
Like, I have to.
Well, you said recently when you were on holiday, when you were away from the business, you had a couple of weeks and you had some time to actually just think about things.
I love that time. Like I love the quiet time because I'm very clear. I believe I am. I'm very clear when I'm quiet in the mind. Like I can be very targeted and deliberate about things that need to happen. When I'm in the jar, I can't always read the label. So, there's just so many things to think about and worry about that you're messing around with the stitching on the patchwork quilt. Whereas when I'm away, I like to take a step out and look at the actual quilt and say, is this even the right quilt? Is this the right material?
Yep.
Is it big enough? Does it fit what we're trying to cover?
Well, I think with business of your size and our size, you're still very operational and in delivery, but then you've got to be strategic and sort of leading the team. So there's so many different hats that you've got to try and wear. But you sort of just get drawn to like, what's the most urgent at the time.
It's easy.
Might not be the best thing, but it's kind of like where your sort of attention needs to go right then.
Yeah. And I think that, to be fair to us and small business owners, is the consequence of not fixing that is actually pretty dramatic. So there's a reason why some of those fires need your attention. But I've, hence the name Scalabl, I've always wanted and tried to build a scalable model that doesn't require me. And I'm in the world of dependency management, so I don't want to see any single person dependencies ever, and even not really understanding what that would take probably was an underestimation on my part.
Yep.
Because
how's it going in terms of reaching that?
It's going okay.
Yeah.
We're smaller than we've been for a while, but we're probably in the best position to really put in things that the business needs going forward.
Yep.
It's an absolute privilege to be able to run a business no matter what the size, and to have some say in our destiny. But again, the brutalness is the market will decide. So you can have the best idea, you can see a way to solve the problems better than anyone's come up with before, but if the market does not see value in it or understand it, good luck, because it won't bite at it, even if you've got the right thing. I find that fascinating as well. Adoption of any sort of technology is the key component to whether it succeeds or not, or any sort of product for that matter.
It could be the greatest product.
Yeah, like I love an hoodie, but who would have thought, that.
What type of hoodie have you got?
I've got a cloud one. It doesn't really sort of do much, but the avocado is a big hit for the dog and the kids, and
I would have picked something like a Yoda or a Star Wars or something like that.
My son's 8 and bang into Star Wars, and I got to say, it's highlight of my week when he says, "Do you want to sit down and watch Star Wars?" I'm like, yeah. So
maybe you should go get a Yoda one.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, it's interesting just to hear how you got into agile. Obviously, very early. I've been in tech for 13 years, and when I started, I didn't really know about it either. So you were doing this sort of 20 years ago. That's well ahead of time, and sort of how you started Scalabl. So now I'm just interested just to, if someone's out there, they're in an organisation or they're in a tech team or a dev team, and they were looking to start with implementing agile, or maybe they are and it's not quite working for them. What would be your sort of advice in terms of where would you just start? How would you just start with implementing agile?
In a team?
Yeah, in a tech team. Or say, I suppose it is a good question though, because if you go look at an organisation, I mean, we'd probably say to start with a team within an organisation anyway. You wouldn't normally go try and run it across the whole organisation, but that's kind of just our view on it. But yeah, if you walked into a client and they said, we want to start agile or improve how we're working, where would you start with things?
That's a deep question with lots of answers.
Yeah.
And I'll try and be concise in how I answer this. So it all depends on their context. It all depends on who they are, what type of business they are, and what type of business they want to be, how much time and effort they want to put into it, and where they're trying to go to better give them the right things. But if we're just talking, I think your original question was a bit cleaner than I got us into this, which is, if someone's just starting out and wants to learn some things, where do they go? I think that's an easy place to answer.
Yep.
If it's an organisation's just starting out, really, this is the same for the tech team actually. What are the things that are getting in their way? Understand that first.
Mm-hmm.
Then look to how does a more agile approach help them? And if you look at any of the frameworks that are out there, generally they're micro controls to reduce their risk. So stand up is to reduce the risk of spending time on the wrong thing. Retros to reduce the risk of making the same mistake again. Portfolio check-ins to reduce the risk of any dependency management or problem that no one can see.
Mm-hmm.
They want it early. You want it early, right? You want to see things early so you can make a decision that's informed. I always say seeing things or hearing things late is just bad news. Oh, the project's going to be late. Oh, well, I've just got to spend more money.
Mm-hmm.
If you get that news early, which is we've got a problem, you can choose to put other people on it. You can choose to change the scope. You can choose to extend the timeline. You can choose to spend money. So you've got options.
Mm-hmm.
So to get someone started, I think there's a few things that makes sense, which is, one is understand, what does modern leadership look like? What does a modern leader look like and how do they behave? Is a good understanding. Scrum is obviously a simple, clean model that works in a single team with a single piece of work. You've got scaled frameworks like Less, which take the Scrum framework and scale it around a product, which is, again, pretty cool. Someone sat and thought this through. And they've got loads of data points to show why they've made certain decisions in that framework. You've got other things like Safe that are predominantly more suited to large-scale enterprise sort of models. But, you can look at YouTube, there'll be tons of stuff. But like Product Owners in a Nutshell, I think, is a Henrik Nieberg video that's, simple overview of that role. Scrum Master role, there's a similar video on that. Read about Scrum and understand about what it's trying to achieve and why. The next step is then to look at how does it apply to your world and everything else. But one thing to do is, this is human nature. You can't force it on anyone. And if you get all excited about Scrum or Agile or whatever the thing is, and you try and just push it on a team, there's a high chance they reject. So you want to think about how to position ideas and things in a way that actually helps them, solves their problem and lets them see the value in it, rather than you spout about how good it is, right? Like me coming back from a wellness retreat and telling you all the things that you should be doing in your life to get more performance. You're like, thanks, mate. I'll have another beer instead. It's a similar thing. So people are, this ultimately becomes an inward journey. The whole transformation piece is, how do we think and operate inward so that we can operate outwardly in a way that's conducive to a collective human movement where we actually look after each other and care about each other, while still holding each other accountable. I mean, it's that whole nirvana place of everybody's happy and free, but they're also held accountable to build competence, make good decisions as best as they can, deliver the outcomes. It's a funky space to be in. But to go back to your point, I could send you some books and some articles, some things that might accompany this, but there's tons of things out there. I think it's just finding the right things that are more pragmatic than purist would be my advice, because in 10 years' time, who cares whether someone's agile or not? I think they just expect that you have those skills, that mindset, that collaboration in you, and you're good at delivery. Yep. So I think it's one of those things that the movement will fade out in the fact that it will become the norm.
Yeah. I think, from the teams that we've worked in and work with, there's definitely some practical things that you see pretty often. If you go and talk to a dev team and it's not working, it's like they're working on too many things, there's too many goals, working across too many products or projects or whatever it might be. Down to requirements aren't defined well enough. They're not involved in the planning, so they just get given tickets and they're like, what does this mean? They don't understand the context of like why they're building, whatever it is that they're building. Those sort of, and then outside of the practical things, there's the cultural stuff around. You've got a visibility and transparency. You've got to be open to feedback. You've got to not be worried about failing and all these sort of things. So, what are the sort of common things that you guys come across, and maybe how would you sort of start to address some of those?
Yeah, all of the above. At an organisational level, we see, dare I say it, too many priorities. So they're all equal weight in. These are our 6 or 8 or 10 priorities. And so, number one, that's hard to know what the priority is in order. Too many issues around dependencies. Again, you mentioned it earlier about, you were talking about something, and I was going to say it's funny because we don't measure, it's the waste in getting the requirements and not doing that well. No one measures the cost of the dependency over the life of a project. No one's going to, ever. I mean, I might do one day when I'm retired and bored. But if you actually saw how much that cost you, I think you'd do something about it. But it's just sort of hidden because you just get on with life. So fundamentally, for me, like trying to get to the root cause of this is, are organisations designed to deliver value to their consumer? And I tend to see that they're not designed in a way that's conducive to make that the most optimal it can be, with all the supporting services that you need to make that work. It tends to be very siloed is a wrong name, because I don't necessarily want to cast judgment on whether they're siloed or not. But there's multiple competing departments, skills, technologies, things that almost make that really overly complex. So there's too many priorities, there's too many single person dependencies. The people aren't organised around the value, they're organised around a department or a thing. So it's harder to make that connection. So then going into the team level, these teams are stretched. They've got people off on other things. They've got too many different pieces of work coming in. Estimates are sometimes done for them. They've now got to stick to the estimate.
Yeah, and they've got no control over that.
They've got no control over it.
They feel under the pump straight away.
Exactly. So you, those different layers of exec, portfolio, and then team, what you've actually got is a compound effect of waste that's just getting worse the lower down the chain or the further through the chain it gets. So by the time it gets to a delivery team, it's quite a ball of mess, and there's been a lot of waste that's already occurred. So to sort of re-engineer that problem, what does it take to get an idea into the hands of a consumer? How much does that actually cost us? And how are we really aligned to that flow? And how are we focused on flow as a real thing that leaders, middle managers are actually tasked with being in control of?
Yep.
Rather than I manage a team, I manage a component of the thing, in which case the flow is not considered, in which case we cause lots of problems downstream, up and downstream all the time.
So you're talking about setting up teams so that team have got everything they need to be able to deliver whatever that value is, right? So it's not just you've got devs here and designers here and testers or whatever, like whatever that team needs to be able to take that and deliver it to a customer is sort of how you want to set it up, and so it can flow through.
More often than not, and that isn't, again, not trying to sort of make a generic statement, but sometimes we see companies set up sticky teams, but then the demand, the backlog of work changes, so now you've got two sticky teams having to deliver one thing, and you've actually just created the same problem under a different guise. And the problem you're trying to avoid is dependency management.
Yep.
So what I want to see more of as we get more fluid, nimble organisations is more like a networked effect, whereby teams can form around the value. And obviously, if that value is long lived, that's more you got efficiencies and all that great stuff of them understanding the value in the customer and the product and all that. Like, of course, you want to keep that. But if the organisation is moving in a different direction, you need the flex to be able to move around it. I'm not sure I answered your question about the common problems I see, but fundamentally they revolve around lack of understanding the product, the why, the work, lack of exposure to the consequence and the impacts of decision, lack of autonomy, and sometimes when they do have autonomy, sometimes there's a problem with competency.
Yep.
So if you give autonomy without competency, I think you end up with a bad answer, and agile's blamed for that, when actually fundamentally we're talking about creating an environment for work to flow through as effectively as possible with engaged people, building products and services that customers love.
Yep.
Fundamentally what I think we're trying to achieve in the highest level of, businesses thriving.
What about, so you mentioned like prioritisation a couple of times. So I've got a view on this, but I suppose, my experience is going from that old sort of waterfall where, everything's in scope, everything's important, and to more of an agile approach. It's more around like, what are your goals, what are your objectives, and there's multiple ways you can achieve that. So, and I find, like, when I talk to clients about this, if you said, tell me all the things you need to deliver this login page or whatever, they'll give you a whole list of things, and it'll be like, this is all important. Okay. If we want to deliver this in 2 weeks, then tell us what's important then. And it's amazing how if you just put some time frame around something, they go, okay, well, I don't need that. I don't know. It's just like, I find it as like a really useful way just to like help people make decisions. And that's that sort of, getting at how they prioritize things. But for me, that's like super valuable. It's just like, because that's waste, and you can achieve those goals some other way. But just giving people a framework for how they're going to go and make a decision, I find super, super valuable. I don't know what your sort of thoughts are on that.
I have nothing against projects with what I'm about. I have nothing against projects. But projects are really good for a one-off thing. And if they're a repeatable thing, you more want to see a stream of work and the same type of people on it, so you can get value and efficiency through that. So where I'm going with this is typically what a project does, there's a downside to it, is you'll have all the scope and all this stuff and you'll price it all up. And now if I'm a sponsor of a project and I've got $1 million of capacity to use, as long as the project's on track, I'm not focused or caring about whether or not we're delivering the right scope or whether we're being really lean, because from a governance and reporting perspective, I've got the capacity's on track, the thing's green, I've got a million other things to do, I'm not really worried about it.
Yep.
So it causes this, Parkinson's law, where you use the time that you're allocated to fill it up with the task, right? Yep. And so what you're talking about there is saying, okay, let's get creative with the constraint of time. If we don't scrimp on quality, and we've got an objective to do this, how could we do it in this time? And, I think that's, it opens your mind to think differently. It creates some energy and creativity around the solution. I don't see enough where the objective's actually been met and we're saying, right, there's enough there to stop and we should now focus on something else. In a larger scale organisation, the typical response is to complete the project in its entirety, and who knows how much waste is in that. If you're looking at delivering the highest value work at all times for the organisation, my assumption would be in those project last sort of thirds,
there's definitely some waste.
There's some lower value items that actually are just being done because the governance around it says it's all fine. I think thinking about it in a different way. So like, again, this whole, some of the problems that agile movements and agile environments and agile thinking has to tackle is, you start with the team. You asked me this earlier, like, what can a team do? A team can do some stuff, but then very quickly they realise they're constrained with how does the work come into them. The requirements are already done, the project's already funded, you've got this much time, so there's already a problem there. Then you've got the other side of it, which is the technical agility around how do they deploy and own it and look after it and all that, and there's dependencies or problems in the way. So very quickly that team now is constrained and that can only go so fast. And so what you end up doing when you start learning more about agile and everything is, you start looking at the whole bloody business and going, well, actually, if they're going to do that, then we should really re-engineer that and then re-engineer that. And no wonder it has a bad name at times, because you're actually unpicking all of this process to say, actually, this is not serving us anymore. Like it did for a time. And there's smart people who put these things in place, and it's really it's clever stuff, but it's not going to work in this way that we now need to operate. And I see this problem all the time. There'll be a problem with deployments, broken something, there's an issue. The immediate response tends to be more process. And you think
more
about
controls.
And you think about what happens to an organisation over 20 years of that. No wonder there's tons of process that isn't serving them. Not to say it's not good, like the thinking's there. It's just how it's applied is sort of not as effective as it could be. So how do you turn all of those great skills, like project management skills, how do you turn those great skills into how a digital, modern, fast-paced organisation would work? so that you can get the best of both of those things. It's not all in or all out for me, and it never has been. It's not you're agile or you're not. It's has the organisation become more adaptive? Has it become more nurturing? Has it become more transparent? And how do you have hard conversations with people if it isn't going as you want it to? And then you've got all the beautiful stuff, which is every engagement we've been on, higher engagement, faster throughput, same level of quality, if not improved, more joy at work, more doing of the right thing, more customer uptake. Like there's so many good benefits to them.
More engagement.
More engagement.
One of the things we see is
massive.
The dev team actually getting engagement with the rest of the business and
Absolutely.
them understanding what they're doing, and it makes a massive, massive difference from just doing a showcase or something like that, so they can actually understand it and see what you're doing.
It's a really good point, and there's often the IT and the business strain or some sort of issue there in the departments. And what we've seen is when the business, the people who are focused on that stuff, get closer to a dev team, there's a dual appreciation for each other. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, we're all doing the right, we're all working hard here.
Yep.
Let's go.
We had a really good example for like a large transport logistics company. We were working with them, with their dev team, and got them to do a showcase to the rest of the business. And it took them a little while. They were just they were doing showcases just internally, just within their own dev team, and then finally they did it to the rest of the business. And I don't know, they must have had 20 or 30 people attend from all over Australia. And one of the bits of feedback was they didn't realise that the systems they were using that they'd built in-house, and they're like, we're actually so much more advanced than what they thought they were. They thought they were just whatever off the shelf or something. They had no understanding that they were custom building these systems just for them. So yeah, that sort of stuff, and it made it like you could see the change in the team as soon as they got that engagement, that feedback, and they understood that what they were doing was valuable and people were using it, and they were getting interaction with them and feedback from the actual business. Massive difference. It was 1 30-minute showcase.
Amazing. And it's funny. Like I used to use this analogy that business health is like personal health, and eat your kale, go out for a run, do your exercise, do your meditation, do your stretching. Who's doing enough of that? I definitely am not. But it's just, the same thing comes through in business, like the neglect of certain things over time. You don't realise it, and then you look at it and go, shit, we're really unhealthy. A showcase and sharing and communication and engagement and understanding, these are basic things that are easy to just miss. And before you know it, over time, the compound effect of those items of neglect or bad decisions suddenly catch up, and you've got to shift out of it.
Hey, so we're running out of time, but I've got one more question before we wrap things up.
I have to go.
Yeah, so do I. Look, I mean, you would have seen a lot of changes over 20 years. So where do you see it sort of heading? Where is the industry going? What's the acceptance of agile? Where do you see sort of the future direction for the stuff that you guys do and you help businesses implement?
Yeah, great question. I think the skills and capability is a piece that will be expected. So whether you're a dev, whether you're a BA, whether you're a project manager, whatever it is, you are able to use all those toolkits of, service design, customer design, UX, UI, in terms of the concepts. You don't have to be an expert in those things, but you've got those skills. You've got agile skills. You can be a scrum master if you need to be. I think that will see a rise in wanting those skills in-house. I think there'll be a shift in redesigning the organisation around its key service offering. I think service design is in its immaturity. That's why we invested in it 2 years ago. It's it feels like the smartest way to outline all your products, services, capabilities, systems, tools, processes in one blueprint, and then improve from there. And I think that the industry I'm in will get more nimble, dare I say it.
More agile?
I think it's a lot of time and effort and expense to transform an organisation and transform a culture. And once that sort of first hurdle is embraced and moved, I think the nimbleness comes in. How do you keep it alive? How do you, unless you're getting up at 6 a.m. and eating kale and running, you're probably going to need a coach or something to keep you accountable. Who's holding the organisations accountable for their culture and their way of working and how they do it so that they can be their best? Because guess what? When things go bad, it's the easiest thing in the world to drop your operating rhythm. When things are crazy, just drop everything, just get onto the fire. But it's the thing that will keep you sane and keep you on track if you just hold on to the structures, the bedtime routine, the morning routine. Like if you let go of that and you've been doing that for a while, you look at how bad you feel when you don't do those things well. Yep. It's the same thing. We just don't have the thermometer at the moment to show, when we're neglecting those things. So I think they're the things that really strike me.
Yep. Okay. Hey, just to wrap things up. So, if someone's watching this or listening to it and they're thinking about, how they could do things better in their organisation or in their team, apart from contacting Scalabl and getting you guys to come in and help them, is there one thing that you'd say, like, just go and start with this? Or what's the one thing that they could go and do just to start making a difference?
Best thing off the top of my head would be to introduce on a cadence that makes sense, weekly, fortnightly, whatever, a retrospective. So what did we do as a team in the last 2 weeks that was good? What wasn't so good? Where can we learn and improve? Micro continuous improvement system right there.
Yep.
And you're just constantly improving. And take one thing to improve, not 5, just one. And just do it small. And just get used to having that conversation and getting better.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think the retros are one of the most valuable sort of activities.
Absolutely.
They can often get dropped or missed, but I think, retros are probably one of the most valuable ceremonies you could do if you're trying to improve things or run an agile team or business. Hey, Richard, thanks a lot. We've sort of run out of time. Could keep going for a couple of hours, I'd say, but really appreciate you coming in. If anyone's watching or listening, got any questions, drop a comment, or you can email us, or you can go check out Scalabl. What's your web address, Richard?
Scalabl.com.au without an E in the word Scalabl.
There you go. Or reach out to Richard. Thanks again. Thanks for coming in, and
pleasure.
Thanks for listening.